number one is, what is your trump card? What does almost every saxophonist in part of Russia know about sax? That's cool, that's UK.
Well, I think the saxophone in itself is a pretty cool instrument. The fact that it looks different from any other brass instrument, it's got that cool shape, just in very basic terms, gives it that appeal. And it's got the sound as well. It's got a really cool, sexy sound. It's just got that image, I think. So I think that has to be a good starting point.
One thing that's very key is the fact that we are very single-minded and very focused. All we do is the saxophone, and so we can specialise to a very great degree. We can have all the very interesting little accessories that the average music shop doesn't. So whereas you can find a very ordinary student saxophone in every high street in England, if somebody wants a specialist mouthpiece, a specialist ligature, they want experienced advice on which reeds to buy, and all those interesting little accessories, we have that specialist knowledge because it's all we do. If we start selling trumpets and trombones, we'll lose. Not only will we lose some of that focus, but also customers will perceive that we're not such a specialist anymore. They'll think we're more of a general brass and woodwind store. So by specialising so much, it means in that one area you can be number one in your field. Your customers see you that way, and of course that's all you've got to think about. So in this recession, we know of other shops that are having to spread their resources, their money around on trumpets and trombones and guitars and flutes. All we have to think all the time is just saxophone, and it's made it easiest for us. So that's the one thing that sets us aside from any other probably business like ours, certainly in Europe, I don't know the rest of the world, that all we do are saxophones. So we can keep every model, every colour, every change of specification, we can keep them. So that's our defining,
that's
unique
what sets
selling
us
point,
apart.
sets us apart.
What did you start your business with? I mean, let's take the very beginning. Very beginning. Did you have such an assortment as you do have now?
No.
Or maybe did you have some little offices?
I started from home.
From
my home, from my house. And my idea to begin with was based all around renting saxophones, hiring them out to students. So initially, I came up with a brand name, and I went to a Taiwanese manufacturer and I ordered 50 saxophones with my own brand on them. 50. So, but at the time they cost maybe $300 or less than $300. So it wasn't a lot of money. But then I put in an advertisement in an English national newspaper for people to hire them for £99, which is a small amount of money in England, for 3 months to learn to play. And I put a video with it, and a stand, and reeds, and a cleaning kit, everything all in one. So people who'd always wanted to play the saxophone didn't have the embarrassment of walking into a shop and saying, I don't know what I'm doing. They could just phone me up or go on the internet and just get a saxophone. And from the one advert, I had 300 people for my 50 saxophones. So straight away, there was a demand there. And it was then over a number of years that we developed. We found an English importer of saxophones who provided our instruments. So we no longer had to buy them from Taiwan. So whereas before I'd hire out the 50 saxophones and then I couldn't do any more business, suddenly I had all these saxophones because I could buy them on credit from the English company. And then all the people who we'd started with saxophones, they wanted a better saxophone. They realised they had that it was only a cheap saxophone, and now they wanted a BMW saxophone, a quality one. And so they come back. And so we gradually, over maybe 10 years to get to where we are now, we just gradually got more and more better saxophones.
We've developed accounts with some of the major suppliers and just built up over the years.
There was no master plan. It just happened. Really, it did.
Almost organically.
Yes. we just went with the market. And we were very lucky that the internet developed at the same time as us. When we registered sax.co.uk, it cost me maybe £10. It wasn't, people didn't see internet names as important. And then of course, as the internet's developed, having sax.co.uk is the #1 domain website in England, and it's worked, we've got busier and busier.
I think it's probably also fair to say that we're kind of the innovators in the sense that we take a few risks. There are products out there like the plastic saxophones that were released last year, and no one else from the UK took a risk on it, but we decided to do it just because it's something a bit different from the normal, from the usual kind of boring brass models. Let's go for that. Let's go for some weird and wonderful saxophones, like the smallest one that's ever been made, called the Soprillo, made by a German company, and the largest one that's ever made, the contrabass. So we now have these in our stores, so we represent, you know, the full range from the really weird and wonderful to the normal ones as well. So we just have something a bit different to offer people.
Have you sold some? Sold any?
We sell the tiny little ones, but the big contrabass is its price is £17,500 in sterling. So it winds up quite an expensive instrument, but more than that, it causes a stir. It creates a buzz and an energy about the store, which I think is probably more important than, you know, perhaps
did
an
you ask
actual
about
sale.
the plastic saxophones? We sell. We can't buy enough of them.
Yeah.
We've in the last maybe 6-9 months, we've received about 120 of the plastic saxophones were sold out. We can't get hold of enough. So yes.
So it does work, absolutely.
What do English musicians prefer play on? What brands are the most popular in England?
I would say Yanagisawa, very popular at the professional end of things. Yanagisawa, p.mauriat, very popular of recent years. Selma still retain that kind of elite status. They've always been. They've got such a long history, 100 years of making saxophones. So people always aspire to buying a Selma and playing on a Selma, even though they're very expensive in terms of their price. Yamaha is still popular. Yamaha are good because they cover the range, so they've got the student saxes all the way through to the professional and in between. They're kind of probably 4 leading brands that come to mind. In the student end of things, there are quite a few, and that can be a slightly messier area. Some of the outstanding ones are Trevor James, Bauhaus, Jupiter, these kind of brands. Yeah.
Could you describe your attitude towards used vintage copies on eBay.com? So, do you personally and English guys consider that the quality of new ambitious guys like TJJ, you say, p.mauriat, Antiqua Provence, and so on is inferior?
Traditionally, saxophones that were made in places like Taiwan were seen as inferior. And yes, a lot of the older players will only look at Selma, Yamaha, Yanagisawa and Keilwerth. They were always known as the Big Four. But with younger players coming up and more and more quality products coming from places like China and Taiwan, like the camera you're using and the iPad that you're using, the younger generation players, they do not perceive Chinese and Taiwanese products as cheap. And a lot of that is going away now. And the first company which really broke the mold was p.mauriat. And whereas we as dealers had reservations about selling a professional Taiwanese-made horns, most of our customers, particularly the younger customers, don't have any reservations at all. We mentioned Trevor James. They've recently come out with their signature custom range, and they're selling very, very well for us. And some of the top pro players are now looking at them and playing them. And it's as if the perceptions of the customers has changed dramatically. And it's almost like the dealers that are being slower to catch up. Because most of the dealers are of my generation, and we find this with p.mauriat in the UK, for a while we were distributing it, and we had great difficulty getting other shops to buy it, because the owners of the shops wouldn't buy a professional Taiwanese saxophone, despite the fact that their customers want it. And I actually think we as a business have done very well, because we have carried these expensive Taiwanese professional brands, and they've missed out on the business. It's crazy, but it's to our advantage. You asked about the plastic saxophones. We are now distributing the plastic saxophones. Not many shops will carry them, because they say, no, it's made of plastic. The other leading shop in London is Howarth's. Howarth's technicians looked at the plastic saxophones and said, no, we won't have them, because they're plastic. We are just down the road, we've sold over 100 pieces. You know, either you're in business or you're not, and this is a saxophone which customers want, it sells. Why let technicians say no just because it's made of plastic? Musicians like it. It's crazy, but it's to our advantage, and I think it goes back to what Jim said about being open-minded. You know, just because a saxophone made of plastic, don't dismiss it. If I was you guys, I'd get onto vibrato straight away and say, we'll sell your plastic saxophones in Russia. You must have a huge market for them.
And I think you also have to go back to the product. I mean, go back to p.mauriat, for example. I didn't know anything about them 5 or 6 years ago, or whenever it was that we'd started dealing with them. But I just got a tip-off that they were a great sounding horn. So I went to the stand and I couldn't believe the sound I was getting out of them. So without knowing anything to the business side or the distribution, I just knew that we wanted to get our hands on them, as sellers of saxophones. And so it's kind of the sound, it's the quality of the instrument that helps to sell it. So regardless of the fact they might be made in Taiwan and this, that and the other, as a fundamental rule, you've got to have a good product. It's maybe doing something different. So with the vibrato, it's doing something different. With the Mauriat, it's got a great sound. And 5-6 years later, here we are selling hundreds of them.
In your country, are there any particular stylistic or instrumental preferences of musicians who mostly play classical music or jazz or pop?
Yes, it is divided up along quite strict lines, isn't it? You do have, there's a classical saxophone world and there's a jazz saxophone world, and there is a big gap between them. We've always concentrated on the jazz side, and so in England we don't actually do great educational business. It's a different world. To really get in with the classical world in England, you need to go along to all the classical music colleges and do presentations and attend various events that they put on. And it's sort of not our world, is it? So we're probably not experts on that. But we get a lot of those players still come to buy from us. It can be very difficult because a lot of their tutors will say, when you go and buy a saxophone, you must buy a Selmer. They don't let the student have an open mind. They say you must buy a Selmer, and before you buy one, you don't try one, you try 6. Now, how many shops can have 6 of every Selmer in stock? And the same with mouthpieces. They want to play. They come to buy a Selmer mouthpiece, and their tutor has told them to buy a Selmer C Star, and you must try every one in the store to find a good one. So it brings its problems, that classical world, doesn't it?
It does. It's a different kind of world. Very sort of strict almost in the way they do things. I think everything's a bit more relaxed in the jazz world, and that maybe tends to suit the sort of business style that we operate in. And I think it's just the vast majority of saxophone players are of the jazz kind of player, jazz, rock, funk, soul, that sort of thing. A lot of our customers are adult learners. They might take it up in their 30s, 40s, even later, perhaps into their retirement. So the sound they've got in their head isn't necessarily a classical one. But the classical players tend to be, they take it up when they're very young. They go to music school, they're 18 years old and they're trying to get their C-star mouthpiece. But a lot of our customers might be mid-40s, mid-50s, and they just hear a really cool hot lick or jazz lick or something. They want to learn in those styles, and so it kind of pushes us a bit more in that direction as a result. So that's what works for us.
They are influenced greatly by their teachers. That's one thing. So many of the classical players, it's almost like they don't have their own mind, or if they do, they're frightened to go against what their teachers recommend. And so often it is you must go out and buy a Selmer. And that's a bit of a problem. But they are looking for very precise tuning,
they're
aren't they?
looking for precision, intonation, and possibly, you mentioned the keys there, they're looking for something that's very fluid, with a light action, so they can play fast technical passages. Not to say jazz musicians aren't looking for that as well, but you know, in particular, if you take some of those really complicated saxophone sonatas, and you need to play with closed fingers and skill, that's important. The Series 3 tends to be a popular instrument for them.
One thing we're just, you know, you were saying about your own business model. I have no problem with encouraging a strong business in Russia, because we can't sell anything to Russia. No, it's not good, it's bad. The problem in Russia, we can't deliver anything to Russia. None of the English companies will take parcels into Russia. Some to Moscow, but even Moscow we have problems. So I think it's a big country, millions of people, and there must be so many saxophone players. And one thing I've always tried to bear in mind is, even if the customer isn't walking through your door, even if he's 1,000 miles away, you try and treat him the same. A lot of the internet businesses get a bad reputation because they're described as impersonal, no service sort of thing. So you give them the personal service, even though they're 1,000 miles away and they email you. So typically in our business, they will email us with a question, and we answer them with all the help we can. The advice might be about a mouthpiece, about a saxophone, just the same as if someone had come in and was talking to you face to face. And this relationship with them, although it's 1,000 miles away, develops. They send an email back, you reply, maybe they phone you up, and you develop this relationship. And one of the nicest emails we had many, many years ago was from a customer in northern Canada, where he was thousands of miles away from another music show. And he said, I love dealing with you guys. It's just like dealing with a local, friendly music store. I get all the advice, all the service, and I think you must keep that in mind. So I know you guys are in Moscow, and maybe you do all this, but when someone contacts you 1,000 miles away, just treat them like your favourite guy walking in the store, and get the product to them quick. Any problems, sort it out straight away, just like the guy in front of you. And I think that pays dividends for us. To begin with, it might just be a box of reeds, but it develops when they want to buy their new saxophone. One day, maybe they'll get on the train and come to Moscow and see you and buy a p.mauriat or a Selmer or whatever. We just keep that in mind all the time.
Well, maybe you have some thoughts to share with Russian guys, Russian musicians who...
Oh, well.
Now, get demos out there. People want to see your face, they want to see characters. I think they like to know who's behind selling the products, they want to see the personalities. I mean, I do a lot of the reviews, and it's scary how many people come in our store and they say, hi Jim, and I've never even met them before. I think they're stalking me, but in fact they've just seen some of my YouTube demos. So from that point of view, it's really enjoyable for me, but it's nice for them to meet the personality behind the guys giving them all this advice.
I think, Jim, they were asking for players, though. Any advice for players out there?
Right.
I mean, but why don't you get your thoughts together? I mean, for players, one thing I would say is use the internet. The internet is such a fantastic, powerful tool. Going back to what Jim was saying about videos, players out there, make videos, get out there. If you're doing stuff and you haven't got local gigs and local promoters, get it online, get it on YouTube. It's fantastic what you can do. I mean, that's the most powerful medium around at the moment. As regards saxophones, I would say keep open-minded. We were saying earlier on about how we were stuck in this idea that you had to buy Selmer, you had to buy Yanagisawa. The most expensive saxophone we've ordered today is a Theo1E, which is the Mantra. It's a new tenor saxophone they're doing. It's the parts are made in Taiwan to their specification. They've got lots of innovations. They come out to America and go to Music Medic, where they set it all up and assemble it and what have you. The end result is a fantastic horn. And like Jim said about p.mauriat, keep open-minded, go out and try them, because there's some fantastic horns out there that don't say Selmer, don't say Yamaha, don't say Yanagisawa, and lots of innovation. Same with mouthpieces, lots of good stuff out there. But I would say the information that's online, fantastic. You can learn so much from it, can't you? And you can promote yourself through it. You any?
Well, really, I think something we were discussing a few days ago is that a lot of good musicians are just that, good musicians, and they stop at that, and they don't go out beyond that to promote themselves. I mean, your question about putting yourself out there on YouTube, that's a sort of answer in itself. But I think we all need to learn to promote ourselves a bit more and push ourselves out there, because there are plenty of good average musicians who are out there with fantastic promotional skills, and they've made it because they're confident they can put themselves out there. But there are too many good musicians who aren't out there because they need to learn the other side of things. So I think it's probably a lesson for all of us there.
Good.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And finally, good luck to Mariachi.
Yeah.
You know, we still have our little Russian dolls.
Yeah.
We're very, very pleased with them, and we tell everyone who comes in. So no, good luck to you guys.
Thank you very much.
Dimitri, thanks.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.